welcome to the Women's Soccer Show. I'm Ali.
And I'm Sarah.
And wow, is what I gotta say. Wow, this weekend, football-wise, was brilliant. From the WSL perspective, I'll say it was a brilliant weekend of football, unless you're a Crystal Palace fan. If you're a Crystal Palace fan, I'm sorry.
I would say from both, truly. There were some wonderful results on both sides. We're going to get into all of it. But yeah, literally right before we hit record, we were just going through all the results. Like, okay, United only won 1-0. Arsenal won 1-0. City only won 1-0 against Brighton. West Ham Liverpool was a draw. Villa Tottenham was a draw. Like, it was tight across the board except for that one game. And that one game, I will say, Crystal Palace held their own for like the first half. I was going
to say first half, unfortunately, the really quick Lucy Bronze goal, second half kind of sunk them. And then, yeah.
I think I tweeted at the end of the first half, I was like, this looks so much better from Crystal Palace defensively. And then it was just like the floodgates. I was like, oh, I jinxed it. It was my fault. I'm sorry, Crystal Palace fans. I take responsibility. All right, we've got a great episode today. It's always exciting when we have WSL and NWSL. Today, we're going to do, of course, WSL. We're going to do that first. We got Game of the Week. We got some news updates. And then we'll get into NWSL where we're breaking down a lot of different teams I'm really excited about. But before we get into it, a few just pieces of news. And we got to start off with Monday. Alexandra Popp, the German captain, announced that she is retiring from international football. Her final game will be against Australia on October 28th. Ali, we love Popp. We've spoken so highly of her. How do you feel about this?
It's always cliche to say it's an end of an era, but it really is, because she's been
really is.
She's been the figurehead for the German national team for so long, and we've talked about her scoring prowess, and to be honest, I haven't really seen who's going to take over from her, so it's going to be interesting to see the transition that the German national team will go up against. But I can't speak highly enough of her. I think she's probably wanting to prolong her domestic career, which is why she's retiring from international football. We see this quite a lot. And Germany are going to miss her, man. And I don't think they realise how much they're going to miss her until they play those few games after her
she
retirement.
Was so prolific in the 2022 Euros. Just an utter revelation. And I agree, she'll be missed on the German front, on the field, and she'll be missed by us fans. Like, she was is still an exciting, but just speaking internationally, she was such an exciting player to watch on the international stage, because when she was on the field, at any point, Germany could score. And that was the reality of it. But we are seeing this more. You mentioned that she's probably doing this to prolong her career. I feel like we've mentioned this briefly, but we'll just say, I think this is kind of like a new trend that we're starting to see, where players are retiring specifically from international football to prolong their club career. Right now, Marta has already announced that she's done with international football at the end of the year. We knew Christine Sinclair did that last year, and now she's going to finish up her NWSL career this year. We knew that was happening. It's still heartbreaking. We saw Rachel Daly do that as well. It's just kind of becoming more and more of a trend. So, I mean, she'll still be playing Champions League football, I'm sure. So we'll still see her around, but she will certainly be missed from the international stage.
But as one player retires from the stage, we welcome another player back. This weekend saw Jill Roord return to Manchester City after doing her ACL last season after 249 days, which, to be honest, feels really quick for an ACL.
That's so funny. When I was about to say, when you put it in terms of days, it feels so long.
No, I feel like when you compare it to like how long it took Leah Williamson and Beth Mead and all of that to come back, it feels like a blink of an eye. And
yeah, I think it's actually just under 9 months. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's body responds to surgery differently, responds to recovery differently. Obviously, Jill Roord was like a huge loss for City at the end of last year. And it was pretty painful to watch them lose her in that exact moment. So for them to gain her now at the beginning of this year, City is already looking like most people's favorite to take the title this year, which makes sense. They were a close second last year, and Chelsea doesn't look the same this year after winning the title, losing a lot of players, and of course their coach Emma Hayes. So City's looking strong. But enough of that. Shall we get into it?
Let's do it. Let's talk football. Before we get into our game of the week, some big news is coming out of the WSL, which is this coming Sunday's match, Chelsea versus Manchester United, has been postponed due to player welfare. This is because Chelsea are due to play in the Champions League on Tuesday, and therefore they've decided that it's not right for them to have such little break between games. It's also because UEFA won't allow teams from the same country to play on the same day. So that's why the teams will be playing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the UK. It's been a bit of a cluster.
It's just dumb scheduling intricacies, and it's a bummer that it's affected everything this way. And I think it affects broadcast schedule as well, because it was supposed to be on Sky Sports and now it's not going to be. So it's just kind of like a whole disaster. But at the end of the day, I'm just glad that they're not making these players play 2 games in 48 hours, because a Sunday game, especially this type of game, that was going to be a huge one. And then turning around and playing Sunday, Tuesday just would have been far too much and frankly not fair. So I'm glad that player welfare is being put first, but there needs to be better communication between UEFA and the WSL, because it's not working right now.
I mean, we're going to get more into it onto our Patreon, so if you check us out on News in 10, we will get into the nitty-gritty of it all. However, I will say this is the FA's fault, not UEFA's fault.
All right, but without further ado, let's get into the game of the week. And this week, it's going to be the 2-2 draw between Aston Villa and Tottenham Hotspur. Allie, you suggested this as game of the week, and I said, let's go for it. You want to tell the people why you felt like this was game of the week?
Yeah, I'm going to go in the fact that every other game was pretty close, apart from the Chelsea Crystal Palace game, which, sorry, Palace, this is the last time I will mention it, I promise. But just because of high scoring doesn't mean that it's a great game to watch. This, as a neutral, I was watching this on my coach coming back from the West Ham game, and it was a fun game to watch as a neutral. Both teams were pretty evenly matched. Villa really came into their own in this game. Like, it was a home game for them. It was at Villa Park, where they're playing all of their home games now, which, for anybody who's not familiar, Villa Park is the main stadium of Aston Villa. It's where their men play, and they've guaranteed that they will play all home games there, which is fantastic news. And it was just end-to-end stuff, and it was great to see these really well even teams go at it and seeing what weaknesses they could exploit. And it was just fantastic.
I actually think this game was a bit of a bore until the last 15 minutes. Like, there were 3 goals in the last 12 minutes of the game, and otherwise it was a 1-0 game, and that one goal was a penalty that shouldn't have even been awarded, in my opinion. We'll get into it.
I was going to say, but it makes you have something to talk about. That's the joy of this game.
Yeah, but like at the end of the day, too, I just felt like I didn't feel like these teams were very evenly matched. I felt like Villa should have had the 3 points. I thought they dominated Tottenham, but I'm going to be honest, maybe it's because Tottenham's brand of football right now, it's just not my style. It's very direct, it's very one-dimensional. That's how Tottenham have played basically their entire stay in the WSL, with the exception of last year. And last year they started to be a little more dynamic, a little more side to side. And I think it's the loss of key midfielder in Grace Clinton, who went back to her parent club, Manchester United. Clinton added a very dynamic element to the midfield that I don't think Tottenham has replaced. And so I think they've resorted back to that kind of one-dimensional play. And at the same time, I mean, Aston Villa was completely dominating the midfield, so Tottenham had to skip the midfield and go long and be one-dimensional. When I say one-dimensional, I just mean balls over the top, straightforward, just trying to find that forward going long, which is just not fun football for me to watch. I loved how Villa were playing, but I didn't love watching how Tottenham were playing. And on top of that, Villa dominated, period, the end. They dominated field, they dominated play, they controlled the game. For me, it's not a super, fun game as a neutral when one team is dominating and the other team is just kind of playing back and trying to get a counterattack. And that penalty kick, I think, is a big reason we saw that type of a game. So maybe we'll get into that, because Tottenham were awarded a penalty really early on, and that changed the course of the game, I think.
Yeah, so I've broken it down by team, so let's do that. Let's start with Tottenham, and then we'll move on to Villa. And let's talk about that penalty. So basically, Tomas tackled Spence, and the referee decided that that was a penalty. And I want to ask you, because I saw it at the West Ham game and I saw it watching a few other games, are we seeing a spate of fouls being given for what is just normal tackling, physicality? And if so, are players doing this on purpose, knowing that if they go down, they're more likely to get the result that they want, the decision that they want? Because again, watching different games, you'd see more physical players shrug off what could be foul challenges, and the refs do nothing.
I think that across the board in football, we're seeing an uptick in yellow cards awarded. And for me, that's a problem. Like, I think we're seeing the amount of fouls called without yellow cards being given out go down, and yellow cards given out going up. And I personally don't like that. I'm a fan of a referee giving a warning. I'm a fan of letting them play. Let it be physical. Obviously, don't let it get dangerous. But, I mean, referees, they do a good job when you're not talking about them at the end of the game. And unfortunately, right now, we're talking about them. Look, I do commentary for Stanford Soccer. I was doing the women's soccer game on Sunday. It was a great game. I saw a foul in a penalty box that did not get awarded a penalty. That was 10 times more of a tackle than what we saw in this game. And the fact that it was within the first 25 minutes, that changes the course of the game. And yeah, I think it's a trend right now in football that I'm not enjoying.
To briefly talk about another game, I will say that a referee that did what you said quite right was Stacey Pearson in the Brighton-Man City game, which is Poppy Patterson was committing quite a few fouls, and she got quite a few talking tos before the ref pulled out that yellow card. I think she got 3 or 4 warnings before the ref was like, right, okay, you're not listening to me. Mm-hmm. You can have a card. And I think that's probably the best way to do it. And she was the only yellow card of that game.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. I mean, I played my entire collegiate career and I got 1 yellow card the entire time. That would never happen nowadays because of this uptick that we're seeing. And yeah, I don't like the course of it. I think we saw the impact of it in the Olympics as well, where we saw multiple players get a second yellow card. They had to sit out for important games. It's not fun for the fans. It's not fun for teams. And it's frankly unnecessary. Cards are all about protecting the game in terms of safety, right? A lot of cards are given for unsafe tackles. Why are we giving out cards otherwise? I really don't know. And to bring it back to this game, this penalty in particular, we don't have to harp on it, whether it was or wasn't a penalty, whatever, it was awarded. The point I'm trying to make is that because it was awarded, Villa, who had controlled the entirety of the game up until that point, suddenly found themselves down 1-0. And that changes how Aston Villa then have to play. It changes how they have to play from behind. It changes how Tottenham can play, because now they can sit back in a lower block, which is what they were doing. And, it doesn't just change the scoreline, it changes the rest of the game. And I think that's what I take the most issue with. I'm sorry, Tottenham fans. I'm kind of giving Tottenham a hard time right now. At the end of the day, they pulled out a second goal. They earned the draw that they got against Villa, especially with the defense. I mean, you look at the stat line, Villa had 19 shots to Tottenham's 4. I mean, that's efficiency. Tottenham had 2 shots on target and 2 goals. That's efficiency at its finest. You don't get more efficient than that. That's 100% batting average right there, everybody. So good on Tottenham for that, because that's something that they did well. But yeah, I guess in terms of the game, I think it's frustrating probably for Villa.
So let's briefly talk about that midfield, because you mentioned about the fact that Tottenham seemed to be skipping it because of how well Aston Villa were doing in that midfield. I'm looking at the Tottenham lineup now. They seem to be playing a 4-2-3-1 with Martha Thomas as the lone striker, and then they brought on Beth England instead. In that midfield, you have Jessica Naz, who we've talked about extensively, Drew Spence, and Hayley Raso, who has now come back to the WSL with Tottenham. What was it? Because for me, those are top class midfielders, but it's something that it seems Tottenham have had the problem with is they don't know how to utilise their midfield.
Well, I thought actually Haley Russo had a wonderful opening game for Tottenham on weekend one. She had so many touches and played really well in the attacking third. In this game in particular, I actually thought Jessica Naz and Drew Spence were nowhere to be found. And Beth England actually came on for Naz, who frankly probably only touched the ball a few times in the entire game. They're missing Drew Spence plays such a different attacking center mid than somebody like a Grace Clinton would have played. And I just don't think that she's like dynamic enough to go up against what Aston Villa have in their midfield. I think it's less about what is going wrong with Tottenham and more just about Villa's midfield is frankly more dominant, and how Tottenham are going to win games. It's not through their midfield. It's through their flank or up top. And that's it.
Let's talk about Villa, because there is so much to say about Villa. I think one of the big things and why they managed to get the lead and almost got the 3 points. I did feel for them with the last minute Beth England, which meant they only got the point. But I think one of the big differences was that Villa made their substitutions quite early in the second half, and they were quite dynamic substitutions. But let's talk about Villa as a whole. First off, the goal that Daly scored that was called for offside, that was naughty. That was naughty, that goal. The control, the shot was just everything. I think Daly's going to be in contention for Golden Boot again if she keeps playing the way she's playing.
Yeah, there's something about Villa that's clicking. I texted you when she scored that goal that got called back, obviously, because it was just gorgeous. It was like chest trap to volley on the half turn and just bang that on a weird angle into the top corner of the net. Like, that was Rachel Daly in her finest form. So, yes, we gave Villa a really hard time last year because they just weren't meeting expectations and something wasn't clicking. And whatever wasn't clicking last year, it feels like it's clicking. And yes, it's been 2 games and they haven't gotten a win, a tough loss and a tough draw, but they've played really well in both games. And both games, I think, felt, frankly, pretty winnable. Could have been 3 points for Villa. It's looking really good so far for this Villa team. And I think a big part of this, I'm a Christy Hansen stan. I think she doesn't get the credit she deserves for what she can do on the flank. But I think the addition of Missy Bo Kearns in the offseason has added such a dynamic element to this midfield. I absolutely love her in this team. And I think it's added exactly what they're missing in terms of energy and tactically.
Yeah, it was one of the surprising transfers was Missy Bo Kearns to Villa, because she'd been such a staple at Liverpool. She'd been Liverpool's poster child, and Liverpool did better than Villa last season. So it was surprising that she went to Villa, but she's already slotting into that system so well. I think this is going to be the making of her. They did 3 substitutions at the 67th minute, which led to Adrienne Lyon coming on for Hansen. And I'm loving the partnership that Daly and Lyon forming. We saw that Daly got the assist for Lyon's goal, but they are playing so well and playing off of each other, playing the different sides, that it's going to be, once that really comes to fruition, that's going to be a dangerous combination for anybody
going
against.
I also specifically love it with her coming off the bench. I mean, look, deep benches win titles, and you look at who came off the bench for Villa right now, and it's Lucy Staniforth, Katie Robinson, Ebony Salmon, Adriana Lyon. Like, this is a deep team. So I actually specifically love Lyon coming off the bench. And I guess, speaking of, because we missed this point about Tottenham, Villa not starting Katie Robinson, I think people were asking questions about, but I think that they're playing great no matter who's on the field. Are people asking questions about why Beth England is not in the starting lineup for Tottenham? Because I am.
They should be, if they're not. Because, we saw this last season. Martha Thomas was brought in as a replacement for Beth England because Beth England was injured. They still seem to be playing them as, one or the other, not both. And I think that Tottenham could really do with, if they are going to go back to that over-the-top, direct football, you need to have 2 up front. And Thomas and England can play well together.
Fortunately or unfortunately, the way center forwards, number 9s, are judged is on their execution and on their goal scoring ability. And Martha Thomas played this entire game. She played all 90 minutes and did not score. Beth England came on as a sub partway through the game, and she's the one who had the equalizer in the 96th minute. And I think that if you're going to be picking your center forward, a lot of it does have to come down to execution. And I know we're only 2 games into the season, and I do love Martha Thomas. I think she's great. But I just want to see Beth England on the field more, whether that means with Martha Thomas or she came in for Jess Naz. Maybe it's instead of just, I don't care. But I think that she deserves to be on this field.
So both teams have interesting tests. Aston Villa will be away to Brighton next week, which I think will be a great fun matchup considering how these two teams have been playing. And then Tottenham are at home to Liverpool, who they've had 2 draws, and they've been 2 quite hard-fought draws where Liverpool have gone up and then conceded late on for the draw. So I'll be interested to see how those two teams go up against each other next week.
Ali, your squad's going to City, speaking of next weekend. Real quick, how are you feeling about West Ham going into City?
My hope is that Man City will be focusing on the fact that they're playing Barcelona on the Wednesday afterwards, and we might get a second string squad. I just don't want to embarrass ourselves. Last season, we went 2-0 down in 3 minutes. I don't want that to happen again.
Yeah, that was rough. Let's go around the world. Around the world, around the world.
Over to Spain, and Barcelona go back on top after a 10-1 win over Granada. Both Real and Atletico Madrid also kept up their perfect start, each team scoring 4 to keep the pressure on Barcelona.
Over to France. Paris FC are currently top of the league with 2 wins out of 2, including this weekend's 8-0 win over Le Havre. Both Lyon and PSG scored big this weekend to keep up the chase.
Finally to Germany. Speaking of undefeated, Bayern Munich remain top of the table after beating Bremen. In a clash between Eintracht Frankfurt and Wolfsburg, it was Frankfurt that came out on top with a convincing 3-0 win. Bayer Leverkusen round out the top 3.
Have you checked out Total Football Analysis yet? TotalFootballAnalysis.com provides researched analysis on loads of football, including the women's game. Want all the stats in one place instead of drowning in a mountain of tabs? Want to explore key matchups and the tactics from both teams? Total Football Analysis provides the stats and analysis to help you learn more about the beautiful game. We have a special discount for listeners of the Women's Soccer Show. At checkout, type WOSO10 to get a full year for just €10. That's €40 of the yearly subscription. Head over to TotalFootballAnalysis.com and type WOSO10 at checkout.
We go across the pond now to the NWSL, and as we are rounding down to the final clinching of playoff places, it does seem like madness is hitting with the NWSL. So we're going to hit you with some quick fun things that happened this weekend. Firstly, let's give Ashley Hatch a shout out, who scored this weekend, which now gives her 51 career regular season goals and has placed her tied for 6th on the all-time NWSL goal scoring list.
Another fun fact before we get into all of the meat, we have to, of course, mention, because Orlando Pride continue to set records. They drew over 17,000 fans at home this past weekend. It was the largest attendance at Inter and Coast Stadium and the second highest attendance in Orlando Pride history. This is so incredible for a team that has had some of the biggest, if not maybe the longest drought and struggles. It just makes me so happy for this fan base who has been so dedicated. There aren't many fan bases that are as dedicated as Orlando Pride fans, and they stuck with this team through thick and thin, and a lot of it was thick, or a lot of it was thin, whatever the bad stuff was.
Thin,
a
darling.
lot of it was thin. A lot of it was thin, and now they are truly reaping the benefits, and it just makes me so happy. They also set a club record for most home wins in one single season. with 8 this past weekend with a 3-1 win over Houston. So just more good things for Orlando, but I just want to recognize that I'm so happy for this fan base because they've really been through a lot.
So this weekend was game 22, which was how many games that was in regular season last year. Obviously, we've had the expansion, so therefore there are more games to be played. So it is a different season, but this is a nice point to compare how the teams are doing after 22 games. The teams that are doing better on points through the 22 than last year include obviously Orlando, Washington Spirit, Kansas City, Gotham, North Carolina, and Chicago. And then on the other hand, the teams that are doing worse are Seattle, Angel City, Racing Louisville, Houston Dash, Portland Thorns, and last year's Shield winners, San Diego. It's been a rough season for San Diego, my friends.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start talking about some of these teams. I'm going to start off with a team that's not doing so great, which is Portland. They are currently on 28 points right now, and they finished with a total of 35 last year and were in second place in the regular season. They are currently 7th and sit tied on points with Bay FC, who is in 8th after a 2-0 loss at San Diego this weekend. So let's talk about Portland.
Yeah, it's so interesting that because we have more teams, there's more games. So it's fun to, I'm just saying, we know it's 2 different seasons, but it is fun to compare. It's interesting to compare the 22 game point. And I feel like it actually is a really accurate picture of which teams are having better seasons, good seasons, and which teams we've kind of pointed to and said, what's going on here? What's changed? And Portland, like you said, is a big one. And I think we touched on them at the beginning of this season, Allie, because we were talking a lot about how they didn't do a lot in the transfer market or didn't do as much as we thought that they needed to. They started the season strong, but when you look at their schedule, they have not won a league game since August 24th. Essentially, they haven't won a league game since we came back from Olympic break. They've lost 4 and drawn 1. Now, could this be the case of just too many international players who left for the Olympics and now they're tired coming back? I think partly, but I think it's mainly what we talked about at the beginning of this season, that they didn't do enough in the offseason. They lost a lot of players. Well, in the offseason and throughout the season. I mean, we just saw Janine Becky went to Racing Louisville. That's a huge loss for Portland. They didn't replace her, really. Rocky Rodriguez, I think I would circle as the biggest loss in this offseason. Mm-hmm. She is one of the best midfielders and most impactful midfielders, I'll say, in the NWSL. And I don't think she got the credit that she was deserved when she was at Portland for what she was able to do with that team. She locked down that midfield, and they haven't replaced her. I think without her and without just frankly replacing a ton of talent that has left, they just feel disjointed now. They've lost their depth, which is what made them great, and they're just slightly disjointed. They're still in the playoff race, but they're going to have to turn it around right now to stay in the playoff race.
Speaking of teams that are still in the playoff race, but they're making it hard work for themselves, let's talk about Angel City. They are 22 points right now, finished with 31 last year, and last week they took a 2-1 loss versus Washington Spirit. There was a lot of pressure on Becky Tweed, who took over as a mid-season replacement coach last season and seemed to do pretty well. This year, less so. Do we think it's a sophomore slump?
I mean, I think we spoke a lot about Becky Tweed at the end of the year last year. She was named interim head coach, and she did an incredible job with this Angel City team that when she took over, it already felt like they were down and out for the rest of the season, but they had a massive end of the season. They lost only 1 match in 14 games. There were some draws in there, but also wins, and to only lose 1 in 14 games is pretty huge in the NWSL. So then she got hired as the full-time head coach in the offseason, and you're right, there were big expectations for her because of how Angel City finished the end of the season last year. And look, I feel like we say this all the time about Angel City. Again, it is about signing, it is about recruitment, it is about off-season moves, and Angel City are a team that constantly make a couple moves. They got Rocky Rodriguez. That was a huge signing. But then you look at the rest of what they've done, and it's like, you can't just make one or two signings, especially in this league. It just has to be more. I hope Becky Tweed stays because I don't think this is a Becky Tweed problem. They just need a little bit more help than what they actually are getting. And right now, I mean, they're still in the race. That loss was really big for them to the Washington Spirit, because right now with that loss, they're sitting 6 points behind the playoff line with just 4 games left.
Okay, and then finally to another team that is in California, Sarah's hometown team, Bay FC. We talked a little bit about them last week, which was about the addition of Abby Dahlkemper, which has been quite pivotal to Bay FC with that experience, that, wise head on her shoulders in the back line. Her teammates seem to agree with us about what she's changed. So Bay FC this season, good season, bad season, what we thinking for?
I mean, it started off really shaky. They, like we said, I don't know if it was last week or the week before when we talked about Abby Dahlkemper and the addition of her and how huge it's been. But at the beginning of the year, this team was leaking goals left and right. And yes, they could score to make up for it, but it wasn't a team that you had circled on your list to say, hey, they're a playoff contender, or they're a playoff contender that then could go far deep into the playoff tournament. But everything has kind of come together for Bay FC. I would say since the Olympic break, but really since the addition of Abby Dahlkemper. I mean, they beat Portland, they beat Racing, they drew with North Carolina. They only lost 1-0 to Orlando Pride, and they just beat Seattle, and those have been their results since the Olympic break. But I just can't say enough how big the addition of Abby Dahlkemper has been. And I bring it up again because Asisat Ashwala posted on Instagram this past week a picture of her and Abby Dahlkemper and wrote that everything clicked when Abby arrived. And I think that, I mean, it's kind of like from the horse's mouth. But beyond that, I'd almost equate them to Gotham at this point in the season last year, because they're peaking at the right time. They're somebody I would keep your eye on.
Another team we are going to talk about, which is Bay's opponent this weekend, which is my NWSL team, Gotham FC. They had a draw this weekend with Kansas City. We got to talk about the defending champions because they've already secured their playoff spot, which, unlike last season, which was down to the wire, squeaking through. And we got to say credit where credit's due. Their coach has done some fantastic work both last year and this year. And I know you've got a lot to say about good old Juan Carlos.
For many years, I claimed Gotham too, and I still do because I've seen more Gotham games than I have Bay FC games because I lived there for 6 years plus. And when you say they snuck in last year, to say the very least, for those who don't remember, Gotham FC finished with 31 points. Orlando Pride also finished with 31 points. And Gotham beat them out for the last playoff spot on a goal differential of 2. 2 goal differential was the difference between making the playoffs and not. And then, of course, we all know what happened. They went on to win the championship. But look, this team has been in the spotlight not just because they won the NWSL championship, but then because of what they did in the offseason. And they went out and they got Rose Lavelle, Emily Sonnet, Tierna Davidson, Crystal Dunn. They made massive signings. And I wrote an article basically saying this super team does not equal success. The reason this team is going to have success is because actually of the management of Juan Carlos Amaros. And like you said, we have to give him credit. I think that a lot of coaches would be overwhelmed with the influx of star power that Gotham FC got. And even with just signing 4 players that should be starters, that will change the way a team plays. And instead, what Juan Carlos Amaros has been able to do is last year, he created a team and a system in which everybody earns their starting role every single week in practice. There's not a starting 11. They had a saying where they had every single player on that team was a starter. and they played within a system, and nobody was bigger than the team. Nobody was bigger than the system. We talked a lot about that last year, and that has carried over into this year. And the fact that he's been able to carry that over, especially with the star power that he has on this team, it's a testament to him and what he's created culture-wise and tactically. He is a great head coach. And I'm excited to see not only where Gotham go for the rest of the season, because they're ones to be reckoned with, of course, but I think he's got a bright future in just head coaching ahead of him.
Speaking of Gotham and their weekend at Kansas City this weekend, there was a specific call that has got everybody talking, which is the referee collided with a Kansas City player, didn't blow the whistle, and then Gotham sort of capitalized on that. Do we know what the rules are? Do we know whether the ref should have pulled the game back? Because I know if they touch the ball, they have to pull the game back.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, what do you think? Just like, what's your instinct? If a ref runs into a player, does the game stop or no?
I mean, I think it has to, because it's impeding play.
Have you ever seen that happen, though? Have you ever seen them blow a whistle when they run into a player?
No, that's true. No. Like I said, if they touch the ball, I've seen it, but...
Yeah, so I'll say this. I feel Kansas City fans, I understand why you're upset about this, but at the end of the day, all of the reporters at the match asked the referees. The referees gave the answer essentially saying the rules state that unless there's an injury to the player that the ref runs into, no, there's no dead ball. And when you think back to the games that you've seen, like, yeah, I've never seen play stopped because a referee collided with a player. I played center mid in my career, and I ran into the referee, I can't even tell you how many times, to the point of I would get annoyed and accidentally curse at them sometimes, hence the one yellow card. But no, the play never stops. And so I think Kansas City fans this became a big thing because Gotham scored, right? This would never be a thing, but Gotham scored and capitalized on it. And it was a ball that would have been Kansas City's possession, but instead it turned into Gotham's possession because the referee collided with a Kansas City player. I understand why KC fans are upset, but at the end of the day, I guess, yeah, these are the rules. And I think Kansas City's team just kind of sat back on their back foot. They seemed flustered by the collision, and that's why Gotham scored. It was interesting, though. It was definitely a moment in a game where I sat there and I was like, what are the rules per this? And I don't know, maybe a moment in football where we can say, hey, maybe there needs to be an addendum where if the ref collides with a player who has the ball and it changes possession of the ball in the game, maybe that can be a dead ball from here on out. But yeah, it's always just an interesting moment when something happens that makes you kind of look back and be like, wait, what has happened? What are the rules here?
So, looking ahead, the big game this weekend is Orlando versus Washington. That is number 1 versus number 2. Before this weekend, Pride had not allowed a regular season goal since July 6th. Houston broke that with their goal versus Orlando on Saturday. So let's look ahead at this matchup. What do we think is going to happen? Because these teams are on fire right now. They're probably in the best form I've seen them in a very long time. So this game is going to be fireworks.
Well, first and foremost, if Washington Spirit want any chance at winning the Shield this year, this is a must-win situation because they sit 7 points behind Orlando Pride, and it's going to be hard to make those points up, period. But if they want any shot at it, this is a must-win game. I'll also say you have Orlando picked to go undefeated this year.
Yes,
and I have this game circled as this could upset the undefeated season for Orlando. Yeah, I mean, Allie, when you look at this matchup, how do you feel these two teams align against each other?
I think it's going to go one of two ways. I think it's either going to be a very cagey game because I think that Orlando are very aware now of the records they're breaking and the fact that, you know what, it would be amazing for them to do an undefeated season compared to what their previous season. So I feel like they may be a little bit cagey, whereas I think Washington have got very little to lose and a lot to gain from this game. So I think they'll probably go a bit further with it. But we've seen how good the Orlando defense is and how good it can be. And I'm still saying it's going to be either a 0-0 or a 1-0 to Orlando.
The last time these two teams played, so their first matchup of the year, was April 26th at the beginning of the year. Orlando won only 3-2. It was a shootout. It was a wild one, actually. Orlando scored, then Washington scored, and then Orlando scored twice, and then Washington scored one but couldn't put a third equalizer away. I think that a lot of this depends on who's available for Washington Spirit, because this past weekend, Trinity Rodman was out with that back injury. Casey Kruger was out, and I think one of the most underrated players on this team, Sara, was also out. And those are three key players for this team. I mean, Sara scored the first goal against Orlando in their matchup in April. So honestly, I mean, I hate to say it all hinges on those three. It doesn't obviously all hinge on them, but a lot. I mean, they're going to need their full power to bring down the Orlando Pride. Obviously, we saw that they can be scored on. They are human. Houston got a goal against them this past weekend. Oh, it's going to be a battle. These teams are very similar to each other just in terms of makeup and how they look. Obviously, Orlando have allowed the fewest goals on the season in 13. Washington Spirit, though, pretty close. They're within the top 4 in terms of goals allowed. So they have a strong defense. Then when you look at goals for, actually, Washington have scored more on this year than Orlando have. So they're both teams with strong defenses and dynamic, high-power offenses, as we can see from the 3-2 scoreline from April. I think it's going to be another shootout. I don't know. I mean, obviously, we're not taking bets right now, but I guess I'll just say that. It's going to be a shootout, and it's going to be an up-and-down chess match. I don't think it's going to be an open game. Like, it's not going to be wide open because these defenses are strong, but it's going to be up and down, and it's going to be a chess match for sure. I'm excited, Allie. This is going to be a fun one. If you were bummed about not getting the Chelsea United match in the WSL, that's okay, because we get this one. This is a huge one. I'm so excited. And I can't wait to talk about it next week.
And that is it from us at the Women's Soccer Show. Please make sure you check out our Patreon. We post all the good stuff there. We're going to have some news and trends in there. We've got unedited interviews in there. So please make sure you check that out. Please make sure you also check our socials. That's where we post all the good stuff, all the news stories, all of the breaking things. So make sure you follow us at the WSL Show. But as ever, I've been Ali.
I've been Sarah. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
This podcast was edited by Monkey Hill Media. Visit monkeyhillmedia.com for more information.